do we need to get Fannie and Freddie fixed, or is this pretty much a failure?
Brenda, this whole thing is incredible. You know what it'd be akin to? It'd be akin to the oil disaster down in the Gulf, and the government saying to British Petroleum, you know what? Don't worry about it. You're out of the loop. You don't have any responsibility whatsoever. You know, here are the facts, Brenda. Fannie, I know for certain, and probably Freddie, but Fannie I know for certain because I know some top executives there, they didn't even want to get into the subprime market. They were pushed to get into it. They argued with the government that it was dangerous. They argued that by doing that, they would be heavily exposed to delinquent payments, and yet they were pushed there because the government wanted to expand housing. Of course, not their job. And so we all know what happened there. And now you, I, everyone else here, the U.S. citizen, is on the hook for, catch this, to 2019, over $500 billion. And to not include them in the reform, again, it's just ludicrous.
Well, Richard, do you think so?
Look, there are no doubt there were excesses associated with Fannie and Freddie.
That's like saying I like to have a drink, Richard.
The good news is that, you know, we had since 2008 this Federal Housing Finance Agency, so they're not without any of the oversight that they had during that run-up that proved so costly. But I would say, which of the following things would we just as soon kick down the can in addition to Fannie and Freddie? The too big to fail, the dealing with abusive lending practices, all of the aspects of the bill that actually were in the Senate-passed bill and that will clearly be in the final bill. I mean, if you're somebody on Main Street, not Wall Street, you want to make sure that these big banks can be wound down without bailouts. You want to make sure that derivatives come out from under the shadows and the hedge fund managers. So, yes, should Fannie and Freddie have be dealt with? Will they be next year? I think so. But that's not a reason not to do all these good things now.
A promise. A campaign promise. Okay, Toby.
Well, look, to me, there should be a little special place in hell for the people who created the legislation that forced $2.7 trillion of bad loans that never got repaid, and then at the same time create a financial reform package that doesn't have it in it. I mean, we are now in a position where we're going to, I'm sure by the time this financial bill gets all the pork put and everything else, we're going to not only ignore Fannie, Freddie, Mae, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, we're going to ignore the problem that they also did 95% of the loans over the last 12 months. Now, if you throw in the FHA and a couple other government programs, there is no private lending system in America, and that is going to come and bite us a hell of a lot more than whether somebody gets their credit card interest rate from 12% to 13%. Trust me.
Pat, you don't think this is such a big deal?
Well, Fannie and Freddie right now are basically in wind-down mode. There's a lot of nasty stuff on their books. The loans they've been taking in since they went into receivership are actually at a much higher credit level, so they're not creating more problems. You know, we need to fix them. I don't know why it's not in this bill. What I would like to see in this bill, although even more than Fannie and Freddie, because it's a current problem, is the FHA. And the FHA is going to be the next Fannie and Freddie. All those 3.5% down things. I mean, the FHA right now is 25% of new loan volume in the U.S., and most of it is crap.
All right, I'm going to get to Eric in Miami in just a minute, but just because we're so jealous that you're there, you have to wait for me to ask Richard another question, which is, I mean, Richard, why not include it? The kitchen sink is in this bill.
Right.
Well, look, let's not kid ourselves. There's a reason that things devolved as much as they did around Fannie and Freddie with the money that they threw around and so forth. And incidentally, remember, the Republicans controlled the House and the Senate and the White House during most of the decade that we just passed.
We're not pointing fingers on
reform.
who did it. We don't care. We just want to get rid of it.
No, you already did point fingers, Brenda, earlier.
The answer is, let's not kid ourselves. It was just too politically difficult. Is that an excuse? No. Is that the actual reason? Yes. And was that a reason to block all these meritorious reforms from passing? I think the judgment was no.
Okay. All right. Eric, now we'll get to you. Now you get some extra time.
Let's talk about this a little bit. We can't ignore Fannie and Freddie. Here's what happens. Before the crisis, Fannie and Freddie accounted for about had their fingers in about half of all single-family mortgages. Last year, up to 70%. Last year, now $5 trillion worth of loans on Fannie and Freddie. The real reason, Richard, that Fannie and Freddie isn't part of this, it's too big, it's too scary, and if you include it, If Fannie and Freddie start to go, it could bring the whole system down. So they're going to leave it out and say, you know what, Chris Dodd and Barney Frank, we know you were part of this, and probably your DNA is on Fannie and Freddie right now. Let's move that aside and let's concentrate on everything else. And it's easy to point a finger everywhere else except for the real problem, Fannie and Freddie. There's the real problem.